car I'm in, because we're just about to make the turn, and I had always been conscious of the president's time, and I'm riding with Ken O'Donnell, who was the appointment secretary. And I looked at my watch and I said, Kenny, how far away are we from the Trade Mart where he was due to speak at 12:30? And Kenny said, it's only about 5 minutes away. And I'm looking at my watch and I said, that's great. We'll only be a few minutes late.
The president's car is now turning onto Elm Street, and it will be only a matter of minutes before he arrives at the Trade Mart. I was on Simmons Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see them. It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
Suddenly, shots were fired. And my initial reaction was to say to the driver, what was that? And he said, I don't know, perhaps it's a 21-gun salute. But the motorcade started to move out rapidly. You could see the president's car and Clint Hill grasping the rear trunk, and off we went. And of course, I have no idea whether the president or anyone has been harmed, but you have at least a feeling that indeed shots had been fired.
I was sitting on the press bus, I think on the second press bus, with a local reporter from Texas, and he observed this, the people running and so forth, and he dashed up to the front of the bus and then came back to me and he said, something's happened. He said the president's car just sped away. He said they just gunned it away.
Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound. I repeat, a shooting in the motorcade in the downtown area.
We're talking about only a few seconds here, but in those few seconds, I remember, wait a minute, the motorcade has taken a wrong turn here. The motorcade was supposed to go more or less straight ahead. It didn't. The motorcade took the right slant of the Y, if you will. The motorcade seemed to be moving very fast. There seemed to be something wrong. I went back over the railroad tracks, and as soon as I went over the crest of the railroad tracks and got to the top of the grassy knoll, there was a scene I'll never forget. There were people screaming. There was great confusion. Keep in mind that I had heard no shots. I didn't know what was wrong. I only knew that something appeared to be very wrong. In retrospect, perhaps I should have, right then and there, started talking to people and asking people questions, but I didn't. I said, something's happened here. And so I began running, flat out running, just sprinting as hard as I could, the 4 blocks to our station.
Tell us exactly what you saw, sir. He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Commerce Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man...
That's all right, sir.
Go ahead, as he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down from the seat.
Two shots?
2 shots.
Did you see the man who did this?
No, sir, I did not see the man who did it. All I did was look in the man's face when he was shot there and saw that expression on his face and grab himself and slide. And the second one, whenever it went, why, I'm positive it had hit him. I hope it didn't, but I'm positive that it hit him, and he went all the way down in the car. Then they speeded up, and I didn't know what was going on, so I just grabbed the boy and fell on him in the hopes that there wasn't a maniac around. I'm sorry. I can't help you more, but I won't forget.
The presidential limousine reached Parkland Hospital 6 minutes after the shooting.
Clint Hill, myself, and another agent lifted the president on the stretcher, and with Jackie running beside us, we raced into the trauma room at the hospital.
when we crowded into the hospital, Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connolly were standing there. John Connolly's wife, the governor of Texas, who was in the car with the president. And it was understood that she was going to an upper floor of the hospital, which I construed to mean that John Connolly had been hit. However, that was true, but I didn't recognize why Jack Kennedy wasn't being moved to the operating level of the hospital.
There was mostly hysteria, disbelief. It is hard to adequately frame the words that can describe that scene. It was as if the life had ebbed away from everybody, and we were going on sheer adrenaline, trying to live out the next hour and hoping and praying that the president was alive and would recover, and that all that we had dreaded was not going to happen.
It was such a terrible blow to one's sense of the possible. You know, the feeling that the most powerful man in the world had been struck down. You couldn't believe that this had happened. In a sense, it was as if our country had been struck down in a way. We just, it was very hard to take in, and not only very hard to realize, but once you did let that realization seep into your consciousness, it was a very emotional experience.
Assistant Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff was shuttling between the location of the vice president in the hospital quarters and where we were. And he was anxious to have something to report to the press. I don't think we were capable, Ken O'Donnell and I, of articulating anything. And we just brushed Kilduff off a couple of times, and he came back, of course, under tremendous pressure.
Shots had been fired at the president's motorcade. The president himself perhaps had been hit. And it was very clear that he'd been taken to Parkland Hospital. So I got on the telephone and tried to get through to Parkland Hospital. I did that quickly because I knew, well, listen, if whatever's happened, if the president's motorcade's gone to Parkland Hospital, this is a big story. And the telephone lines began to get crowded to Parkland, so I'd better get in there and quickly as I can. And I did get through to Parkland Hospital. And the switchboard operator was not panicked, but not calm. And, very quickly told me that the president, it was her understanding that the president had been shot and was perhaps dead. And I'll never forget her saying that. And I followed up with that and tried to eventually talk to one of the doctors and eventually talk to a priest at the hospital, both of whom said that the president was dead, but nobody had said this officially.
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. Mrs. Kennedy jumped up and grabbed Mr. Kennedy. She called, "Oh no," the motorcade sped on. United Press says that the wounds for President Kennedy perhaps could be fatal.
All during this time, Jackie was so brave. She was sitting there in a bloodstained suit, and every now and then she'd go into the room and then come back, and